Hello and welcome to today's Smart Cities post-COVID breakout. As I'm speaking to you, we're coming to terms with a new reality in which the onset of COVID-19 has fundamentally changed the global economy, business, and our way of life. But while the immediate future looks bleak, the pandemic has exposed and reinforced the vital role that smart city technologies can play in overcoming those complex interconnected problems that we face. As such, this breakout will focus on how digital transformation in urban areas can trigger dynamic, human-centered and inclusive sustainable development across the UK. And to run through this important topic in more detail, we have three fascinating panelists today who have given up their time to discuss how cities can navigate the new normal and drive new forms of interaction, sharing, engaging, and participation through the application of cutting-edge technologies. In a moment, I'm going to ask each panelist to provide us with a short introduction to their personal background, the focus of their organisation, and motivations for getting involved in this discussion. I'm then going to initiate a round of questions to provoke debate. And towards the second half of the breakout, we're going to open up to live audience question and answers. So if you'd like to pose a question for our panelists, simply add these to the chat and we'll get around to them. If I could also ask that those joining ensure that you are muted to avoid disrupting the call. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our panelists for a quick introduction. So Clara Jordan from Blackberry, if you'd like to go first.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Tom, and thank you to Tech UK for the invitation. As Tom mentioned, my name is Clara Jordan. I am the Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Blackberry here in the UK. Many of you are probably wondering why Blackberry is participating in a debate on smart cities. I think a lot of us associate Blackberry with the devices, with the mobile devices. But basically, we are a company that for 35 years been thinking about security, privacy, and connectivity, and how to securely connect devices and the privacy really of individuals using these devices. So we've taken these 35 years of expertise and turned them into now a software and services company. When it comes to smart cities, our main focus is really around smart mobility. So we work very closely with the automotive industry, and as of today, I think we secure about 180 million cars on the road today through different ways. In this conversation of smart cities, for where the company comes at this issue is really this. Our mission to support achieving trust in technology. And this trust in technology is a prerequisite to unlocking the potential of technology and smart cities. And if you look at what a smart city is, it really is an ecosystem of devices and infrastructure, but it's all really a lot of code. And so where we are as a company, we secure endpoints, so everything we would connect to a smart city or into an ecosystem of smart city, and we do a lot of work in ensuring that software that makes up things we connect to the smart city and the infrastructure that connects different parts of the smart city is secure. So I'll talk about some of the details and our approaches to securing smart cities and automotive industry more in detail a little later on, but this is it for the introduction, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. And over to you, Elizabeth O'Driscoll, please, from Civica.
Hi, I'm Liz O'Driscoll. I'm Head of Innovation for Civica. Civica are a public services software provider. We work with a range of public services clients across local government, central government, housing, education, and also justice departments. And actually, what we're interested in doing is working with our customers to help them respond to the challenges they're facing and none so much the challenges they're facing at the moment. And particularly in light of COVID, that question about being resilient and responding to citizen expectations really is key for us. So I lead the North Star Innovation Lab. It's a new lab's been set up, and our function is to explore how data automation and new technology can really improve public services. Personally, I've an interest in this area as well, having developed the Net Zero 2030 plan for Exeter City Council. Council, really passionate about supporting the creation of participatory cities that are using data and engagement to build these really great places to live that can be supported by forward-thinking and innovative public services. So really pleased to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant, thank you, Liz. And then over to Dr. Timea Nokta from the Cambridge Centre for Smart Infrastructure and Construction.
Great, thank you, Tom. And thanks for telling the name of the centre instead of me. It's so long. It's always an interesting point of the introduction. But yeah, so my name is Timea Nokta. I'm a research associate at CSIC, which is a research centre of the University of Cambridge at the engineering department. The core research of CSIC is pretty much around developing sort of cutting edge sensing and data analysis models to support improved decision making for built environment assets, as well as systems. There's a lot of cooperation with the Cambridge Centre for Digital Build Britain. I was also working with them on particular projects as well. The kind of projects that I work on within CSIC and also in collaboration with CDBB investigate the use of data and digital technologies in smart cities or digital cities, and around understanding benefits, risks, and shortcomings in this context of urban governance and policy making as well. And these projects range from focus on skills and competency requirements among city managers in smart cities, also devising methods to include policy and governance requirements into technology design and deployment. So for example, we've done a project recently on a city-scale digital twin prototype for the Cambridge City region. And also to understanding the multi-level governance of low carbon mobility in the UK. So a lot of the models that we work with are actually, at least in some form, involve transport and travel.
Brilliant, thank you, Timea. And yeah, I think from those introductions you can hear there's obviously overlap in the different areas that you're focusing on. So I think we're poised for a really good discussion today. But to start off, I think we've got a question for all three of you really. So just to get your perspectives, what do you think that the single biggest effect of the COVID-19 pandemic will be on the way that cities function in the future? If you had to boil it down to one single area, what would it be that you're advising city planners, decision makers to think about? Clara, perhaps we could start with you and go through the same order.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I think really for me, it is that, perhaps what it showed us that even, the companies that were resistant to concept of distributed workforce, have allowed or were obliged to allow their employees to work remotely. So perhaps what this will do to cities, it will really become human-centric, and that they will not be built around enabling us to go to work, but they will perhaps be more places for leisure, relax, and perhaps it will also reshift how we think about, our homes, and this really how we think about, the place of work and a place of leisure and a place of, for living. But I will say what it also has done is to show that, we can all tap into talent globally, that it no longer really matters where we are, that, the concept of workforce and location are somewhat obsolete. And I find, the way this really accelerated the IT transformation, but really the way we think about IT infrastructure, communications, it really changed the way of working and thinking, including for governments and other organizations where this sort of remote work didn't exist before. And it really brought into the forefront the importance of security and enabling, productivity and security for employees wherever they are. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Clara. Liz, I guess, is that a similar perspective to your own? Is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I think for me, the impact is maybe quite more local as well. I think, it's definitely highlighted an absolutely essential role that technology and systems in the cloud play in keeping us working connected, the fact that cloud can give us that resilience and technology can help us access services that we didn't know before. And I think, for me, something that I really hope will change now is just taking a bit of time to recognize quite how innovative our public services have been and can be. It is kind of sad in a way that it's taken a global pandemic to really unleash that innovation in our public services. But I think, there's been some incredible examples of innovation and moving forward and transitioning businesses and organizations to be working remotely, to be moving the systems into the cloud, to be embracing technology. And if I'm allowed to squidge into two things, I think it's kind of related, but that incredible examples of collaboration that's come between public services and with real citizens. And actually, it's been a privilege to observe so many examples of communities and industries coming together with collective action to really make positive changes. And I really hope that will be a trend that will continue.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's something we're definitely going to touch on in more detail in a moment as well. Timmy, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well on the sort of central factor that you think is going to change post-pandemic in cities.
Yeah, I think it's very related to the previous two responses, to be honest. It's maybe I have a different perspective from sort of like an urban planning or city management perspective, or the built environment in particularly. And this might be also a bit of wishful thinking to some extent, but I do think that there will be an impact in terms of perhaps a more heightened role and importance for health and livability in city planning and management, and also specifically how we decide to use public space in cities or space in cities generally. So, for example, it became quite clear during the pandemic how important it is to have access to appropriate green spaces and equally tackling air pollution. And we can kind of think about how these are to some extent interrelated. You could use that space that you're currently using for moving around cars to provide access to green spaces. And so I would really like to see more of those initiatives like the low traffic neighborhood movement in the UK that sort of respond to those challenges that the pandemic brought up, probably more even more as even more crucial. But also they are challenges that will have to be dealt with in the context of climate change responses, mitigation of air pollution, this kind of thing. So yeah, I hope it's not wishful thinking, but or not only, but I would like to see those kind of changes.
Brilliant. So yeah, thank you guys for your initial remarks. I think just to build on a few of the conversations that are already sort of cropping up at the moment. So maybe to start again with you, Clara. First question I had to you to build off your initial remarks was just, how should city planners then think about embedding safety, security, reliability as part of their development strategies? If security and safety and reliability is so important, how do they do that in practicality?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, this we can talk about this at a very macro level or really in detail, but just like with everything with kind of safety and security, I think the key here is to think about how to consider safety and security from the outset, really in the planning. It's not something we add on, it's really something we think about kind of from the beginning, because all the connectivity, all the technology, really it's all going to be just an untold number of lines of codes and endpoints, and they're all going to interact. So really thinking about that from the beginning. I think one of the important things is to have dedicated staff to lead the innovation, digital transformation and security. And I think really thinking in a multidisciplinary way about these individuals who will think about the resilience and safety is going to be very important. I also think that city planners have to think very hard about sort of the procurement and how do you procure safely the infrastructure, and how you think about safety and resilience from that perspective. There's an ongoing reform in the UK around procurement, but I think there's some really hard thinking that has to happen about how we equip those making decisions to understand issues like cybersecurity and supply chain, resilience and all these things. the city planners will really have to think about what tools they have in assuring the safety and security. So I would really recommend to take things like safety certifications, just like we have certifications for green buildings. I think, again, thinking about safety and security, think about what can help us sort of build the baseline around it. And there is really one particular issue that I just want to spend a minute talking about, which is, we will be connecting, we will be building an ecosystem, and really there has to be a trust in that interconnected network and a trust in the data that is going to be shared and exchanged. Really that interaction between cars, pedestrians, autonomous vehicles, and all the value that can be derived from the data. It will be key for city planners to understand how to secure it and how to enable it. If you think about it, cars are shifting from being hardware machines to software platforms, and they will really connect and analyze a great deal of information. And this information can be used to increase safety of the drivers, the passengers, the circulation. But really, when all this data is connected, obviously, we all have concerns about safety and security. So as we are building those vehicles, as we are building that infrastructure, as we're connecting it all to each other, we have to think about how to embed the safety and security at the concept phase, and how do we think about the infrastructure that connects it. So there's a lot of technology really out there. There's a lot of all these vehicle to everything communication systems that help vehicles drive cooperatively, avoid collision, collect this data. So in many ways, the technology that can help us connect this is available to city planners. Really, there are lots of barriers to adoption that are mostly policy and economic based rather than technical. So I would really encourage them to think about, okay, what technology we have available to think about bringing trust, building safety, building security into building these cities. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Clara. And yeah, just to really sort of connect up the points to the question that I had for you, Elizabeth, it's thinking about those tools, those connected capabilities, and how they can sustain innovation across our cities. How do you think city planners can make use of that augmented collective intelligence as cities transform post-COVID?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question, and Clara makes some really good points. I think, as a society, we are facing increasingly complex challenges. And I think, a year ago, I'd have said it was climate change, it was urbanization, it was inequality. And now, obviously, we've got recovery from COVID coming in. And, I genuinely think data and technology could offer us the fastest way to start to mitigate some of these challenges, to address that inequality, to improve the places that we live in. As Clara has said, cities are these huge interconnected systems, and, they've just got absolutely enormous amounts of data, both in terms of historic data about patterns and trends and things that have happened, but also generated daily from IoT sensors and how we move around in vehicles or on foot. There are some examples of how data is starting to help cities, and you've got some good examples in Belfast where the council are using IoT sensors to help combat antisocial behaviour and keep residents safe. But I would say on large, most cities aren't really using the data efficiently to manage outcomes and inform decisions. I would say it's not unfair to comment that the human impact of the pandemic has been enormous. And, I'm noticing considerably increased demand from citizens to be involved in how cities are rebuilt. The whole placemaking thing was coming in already. And I think that's enhancing and increasing as we go. So something like augmented collective intelligence, and I define that really as the interaction of people, technology and objects in the physical world and the digital environment. And if we can bring artificial intelligence to assist us humans in evaluating all of this data and thinking about past trends and how we play that forward into the future, and that incredibly complex set of trade-offs between making decisions, then actually it helps us, AI can help us cut through all that complexity, it helps us make better decisions, and it also helps us coordinate large-scale community participation in how we manage our cities. And again, there are some great examples of usage of technology coming in through the pandemics. You've got Borough of Redbridge in London and Liverpool, and they're already adapting existing systems to start to use data to connect communities together to support and make change during the pandemic. And I'm pretty sure if we get it right, this data and augmented intelligence can help us rebuild our communities and address some of these huge challenges we all face.
Brilliant, thank you, Liz. And yeah, just again to connect up the points, I suppose both mentioned there around those almost barriers to adoption and deployment of cutting edge technologies. I'd like to bring you in, Timia, if that's okay, just to get your thoughts on how could and should urban societies determine what types of technologies are adopted and deployed. What do you think that sort of capacity level is that you need to bring these technologies into use effectively?
Yeah, so I think that is actually a really interesting topic also for research in the understanding how digital technologies and AI as well, that Elizabeth was just talking about, can actually contribute to providing opportunities for more meaningful participation in determining urban futures, and more active involvement and engagement between citizens and communities and the city leaders as well. And of course, that also needs some form of parallel information campaigns and upskilling opportunities for citizens to then be able to meaningfully engage with those technical processes as well. So I think this is like an extremely difficult and complex challenge to be done well too. But it has a lot of positives that I think we can't really just neglect completely. So there are, for example, a lot of good examples around like hands-on involvement of citizens. So for example, in citizen sensing projects, which is actually in many cases contributed to a sort of an active upskilling of citizens of understanding what data is, where it comes from, what does it do, what is the kind of information that it can potentially provide, and the kind of knowledge that it can provide. And what you can do with it in an urban decision-making context. So several cities have done successful projects with that. For Barcelona is a very famous example. Also, there were similar projects in Amsterdam. And I think another way that that we should be sort of looking at these kind of or the benefits that these kind of technologies may offer is sort of creating the conditions or more favorable conditions for experimentation and experiment-based community-led innovation in cities. And of course, we need to better understand how and which technology applications can enable those kinds of processes. But there are some sort of low-hanging fruits, if you like, or for example, research that is very much ongoing. So because I mentioned the low traffic neighborhoods before, you could actually connect those citizen-led initiatives to monitoring transport on the city scale and understanding what those localized experiments mean on this in the context of the city as a whole. So that is an example of how you can actually use these kinds of emerging technologies to enable a more experiment and community-led urban development to some extent, and to deliver those kind of changes that I think the pandemic made quite obvious that are needed in some form and to some extent.
Brilliant, thank you, Timia. And I think that would link quite nicely to a question I have for you, Elizabeth, if that's okay. Just it's really around, you mentioned those barriers holding back the adoption of cutting edge technologies. I guess, within the context, particularly of those innovative AI use cases, what do you think those barriers are that are holding back adoption across cities around the UK?
I think, that's a good question. And actually, Clara hinted at that earlier. It's not the technology that's generally the barrier. It's all around that policy or the economic case. And I think particularly with artificial intelligence, it's often portrayed in the media as this intrusive big brother technology that's going to get rid of people's jobs, and it's going to make decisions about vulnerable people, without any sort of human intervention. And I think, much of the problem is in people understanding the use cases and the benefits that it can bring. I think it does come resistance from public sector officers. Maybe they're concerned they're going to lose their jobs, or the decisions aren't going to be taken appropriately. But it does offer real benefits to support administrative process challenges. Local authorities particularly are really struggling with costs, and there's some phenomenal figures from the LGA come out about the additional cost challenges now for local governments with COVID. And I think there is real benefit for local and national government where logic models can be applied to decisioning. We've got some examples already. Our new AI-based platform, Aurum, is supporting the NHS. I know it's not cities, but NHSs are big parts of cities, but helping them identify efficiency improvements. And just as an example, the algorithm actually completes the equivalent of 13 years of traditional cost analysis in under 24 hours. That's the scale of what can be achieved. And there's no human decision, impact on people in there. That's pure logic-based decisioning. So, actually, far from removing jobs, I think artificial intelligence can allow this reduced number of staff to support a larger number of citizens for that transactional stuff, and then actually allow the reinvestment of that resource into people-centric services, so education, social care, housing, community engagement, where we really need that emotional intelligence, that empathy, and give them the time to develop trust and relationships. So I think, in terms of use cases in the cities, AI can definitely be used to provide insights from data. It can help guide human decision making. Maybe those historic patterns come up for us, helping us understand propensity to risk. So given a certain set of data, are these people more likely to need interventions, and helping us select those interventions earlier. So again, it's either shifting that back end processing to allow more humans to do the empathy services, or to support us again in that augmented decision making, to really match people with support that they need, or give them the services they want. So I think more articulation about the benefits and the use cases, rather than that big brother fear, would definitely be a good step forward.
Brilliant, thank you, Liz. And yeah, I guess just to bring you back in there, Clara, particularly around that topic that Elizabeth just spoke to there. Now, why do you think it's important for city planners to manage those expectations, to build public trust in smart city services? And then, what do you think those barriers to adoption are from your end as well?
Yeah, so I really want to kind of support and add to something that Elizabeth said around the artificial intelligence. I know there's been recently published sort of a high-level principles and high-level plan what the government is going to do. But what I find really important that wasn't specifically called out in those principles is that education, not only, it talks about education kind of to the more general public, but it wasn't talking about education to, policymakers and the influencers, the media, the way we educate journalists to talk about this and really highlight, really speak intelligently about this and the benefits and have those use cases available in the mainstream media, because machine learning and artificial intelligence have been used for a long time. I don't really know. I wish I could remember all the data. But again, and we've seen the benefits of it, whether it was during pandemic before. So if we manage to make those use cases accessible and explain to decision makers, policymakers, lawmakers how things work, I think will yeah, I think that will really bring the acceptance and that fear. People don't like change, and people want transparency. And so I think through education, and Elizabeth talked about empathy and all those things, I think that, you know, that there's a huge potential. But just like with everything that has to do with technology, it's never about technology. It's about how we make it accessible to people. You know, when it comes to planners and trust, for me, it's really, it really goes through transparency, it really goes through safety and security, and it really goes through ensuring that people understands why and how things connect. And again, this is, and it brings even a different topic in for apologize going a little bit on a side, but we always talk about skills. And I feel that as a community, we really miss those translators who can come and say, look, this is the technology, and translating it in a way that will resonate with people. So even the planners, as they're working on planning and building these things out and doing these campaigns and doing a lot of the education and awareness about the benefits, you know, I think it's also looking at what people are we bringing in to do the communication, to do the storytelling, because again, technology is there, but you know, the safety and security are really the concerns citizens have, and so, you know, I think that's something the planners have to kind of do, really think about how you communicate what is coming, why is it coming in terms of benefits, talk about how we're addressing and managing risk. You know, the news cycle is not helping us, you know, in terms of what we see happening in industrial control systems, which is also part of, you know, the smart city. We have to figure out how to kind of make a holistic narrative about it, and how the risk and benefits are managed and balanced in these in smart cities.
Brilliant, thank you, Clara. And yeah, Timmy, I would be really interested to bring you in, particularly on that point. Again, just, you know, building on that idea of the skills required and the competencies required to manage a city effectively. What types of competencies do you think city managers should have, and how should decision makers enhance, you know, stakeholder citizen input in smart city development as they evolve?
Yeah, I think a lot of these points have been mentioned. So I'll just relate my answer to those previous examples, because I think that there is some issues around sort of tech literacy or data literacy in local authorities that would at least enable those decision makers to sort of identify what could be those purposes and use cases, which are kind of relatively less risky in terms of maybe ethical, political implications, which is obviously a very important consideration for a local authority, because a company, for a company, if a particular project fails, you can just go to another location and then tweak it and try it again. In a city, as if you're a city authority, you can't just move to another city. So obviously these issues are much more prominent. And I think in relation to what Clara was just saying, that kind of awareness of sort of technology and technology trends, what is out there, what is possible, is also important to for city authorities or city managers to be able to act as intermediators between the technology companies or the technology supply and the local citizens and communities whose lives will then be affected by these technologies. So again, that's where issues like storytelling, for example, comes in, that Clara was mentioning. So you need to be able to, you need to have some knowledge of that technology background to be able to turn that into then a narrative or a storyline that is relevant to people, that they can engage with, that they can understand, and that also contribute to them being able to articulate what they want, which then you can turn into the demand of like what kind of technologies we want in the city. So that kind of storytelling, engaging type competencies are, I think, very important. Obviously, some of this requires some awareness, at least with ideas like systems thinking, and especially socio-technical systems, which we talk a lot about in my research group, and an awareness of ethics and marginalization effects as well. So I think that comes in when you want to find use cases that are relatively less risky and relatively sort of deliver benefits without those complications that you might run into, in the case of using facial recognition, for example, which is very controversial. And in fact, there is a drive to ban it in Europe at the moment, I think. So I think it is very important to have this kind of multidisciplinary knowledge to understand where you would be deploying these technologies in the first place, so you can use those deployments to build trust and to also a kind of an active upskilling of city managers and citizens as well. So yeah, I think I rounded that up.
Thank you, Timmy. And I can see we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'll just cycle through a question with you, Elizabeth, and then we can turn to the chat. But yeah, really, just to build on that question and that line of thinking, really, how do you think that city planners can drive public participation in the design and operation of smart cities? And then linking back to that trust element, why is it important to do that? Why is it important to think about the expectations of the citizens that are standing to benefit from the rollout of smart city technologies?
Okay, yeah, so it is a massive challenge, isn't it? And I think for local authorities to communicate urban development proposals or to engage citizens about what they should or shouldn't do in terms of development, it can be really difficult. And I think particularly these sort of 2D plans or things in the future, even if it's a beautifully drawn diagram, it's very difficult for people to truly understand what that means and how that impacts them. And what we're starting to see now are a number of examples across the globe of city authorities who are using technology to really start to aid this participation in the planning process. So you've got great work in Cambridge actually on the digital twins, and that's offering planners this wider set of tools and information and these static data models, and it's really allowing people to explore the impact directly, whether you're a citizen or are you a planner or a transport officer. How might that development change your view from your apartment? How might it impact the traffic congestion? What might that really mean when everybody does or doesn't go back to work? Some cities are also piloting things like immersive technologies to help officers and citizens engage in community planning. So more than a digital twin, how do you actually put that around you? Shameless plug now, we've been exploring the use of these technologies in the public services. So look out for our new series, Perspectives, which launches next Tuesday and actually starts to think about urban planning and using immersive reality for that. Yes, trust. Trust is a challenge. It never ceases to amaze me that people are so willing to freely share personal data with Fitbit or with Deliveroo or some kind of commercial organization, and I think it's because they understand the value they get. I share my data, I get targeted advertising. I share my data, I get more health insights, I get hot pizza. Whatever that is, the value proposition is there, and for some reason that value proposition or the trust just isn't there with the public sector. So particularly when I worked in Exeter Council and now again in Civica, I noticed challenges and barriers with citizens wanting to share data with public sector. And I think there's more we can do around the value of that data sharing, so that people can really see that benefit. And I think there'll be like a tipping point once we get going with it, and particularly with things like standardization, and if local authorities across the country are all using the same kind of standards and frameworks and processes, and more cities are developing the value, showing the value in terms of participatory development and better, smarter cities. I think it will come, but I think that trust piece is absolutely imperative to sort of work through.
Excellent, thank you, Liz. And just want to pick up on a comment that's come through a question that's come through on the chat, and potentially build off into a slightly broader topic as well. But the question is, do you think the pandemic has heightened the need for technology in building cities considering we now may wish to minimize touching in communal surfaces, take the need to sort of take temperatures en masse, potentially the need for faces to be obscured by masks, which might inhibit the practice of identifying individuals. What do you think on that, guys? Do you think it's heightened the need for technology in those areas? And I guess the broader question that I had is, how has the pandemic enhanced the need for resilience building in smart cities? So, considering that there's this concentration of technical capabilities, how can that be deployed to enhance the resilience of the way that the systems we depend on to thrive operate? Perhaps, Clara, I'd start with you there, just because it's linked to what you were discussing initially.
Yes, I mean, just to quickly answer the question from the chat, and I can see it, and I'll make a plug for someone else. Chris Yu, who I believe was one of the speakers at the summit, published from Tony Blair Institute, actually published a very interesting, it's an article, but it's like a Twitter, 5 or 6 tweets. And he actually talks about, we don't think about some of the consequences of pandemic, on how it's going to accelerate some of the innovation in health. And I think there is going to be, we're going to actually leapfrog, when it comes to building, because it's all going to be about trade-offs. We want to go to the building. I'm dying to go into an office. So I'm happy for someone to take my temperature or not touch the surface. So I think, we are going to leapfrog because we understand what we're trying to do as a society, economy. We understand what's happening when we're not spending, buying, and that's why, I thought it was amazing. And I just recently moved to UK, and I thought, wow, this is so amazing. So many things continue. You can do online and have delivered. I mean, those are all the benefits of technology we are reaping, but we're also helping economy. So when it's a building or city or health, I think we have accelerated the development, and I think we understand the importance of public health and public health measures, and it's going to help us leapfrog, some of these technological with the developments, whether it's a building or a city. So just very quickly on the on the resilience, and I really see it from really cybersecurity resilience perspective. For me, resilience is a total backbone of smart cities. And it really goes to my point about trust, because it's through resilience of the systems, the well-operating ecosystem, when individuals can trust the safety and security, because at the end of the day, it will be about your personal safety and security. Whether it is that your call will crash or someone will misuse your personal data, it's really that safety and security that is going to kind of make and break smart cities. And so I think kind of building on that is really important. For me, talking about resilience, we sort of have to define what a smart city is. And for me, it's a city where every single element of it, infrastructure, transportation, individuals, public services, law enforcement, have gone through that digital transformation, and we're optimizing those services and managing some of the issues like traffic. So that's what the smart city should help us to do. We will reap the benefit through hyperconnectivity, but really during the pandemic, we have seen so many negative trends of the hyperconnectivity and connectivity. If you think about all the local government devices being compromised by ransomware attacks, same for schools, same for hospitals, there's been really unsecure, poorly secured endpoints, the issues around video conferencing, using WhatsApp with not the best encryption. So we've seen so many negative trends. So for me, when I think about the resilience of a smart city, I actually think about the resilience of those individuals' part that we are going to connect into this ecosystem. So I think there's going to be a lot of work that has to first happen on securing those individual parts, whether it's our critical infrastructure, the water plan, the smart car, or kind of intelligent mobility, because I don't think we can connect things in a resilient infrastructure if its individual parts are not secure. And I'll just make very quick point on intelligent mobility. I mean, the promise of intelligent mobility is huge, from environment, congestion, safety, security. But really, again, for me, what's important is that we look at what makes up these scars, and it's just, you know, softwares and how and so we are looking quite a lot about how you secure the software, the supply chain, because then if you build that security and safety in from the outset, it is just going to make connecting into an ecosystem much easier, and it will really help society trust in the, you know, the technology and what we are trying to build and connect. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Clara. And I can see we've come to the end of the session, but I'd actually just like to close by, you know, running through the panel, very quick thoughts. You know, if there's one takeaway for the people on the call today, you know, what do you think that should be? You know, what should individuals, citizens, decision makers across these you know, city projects be thinking about as they lead into the future? Elizabeth, would you perhaps like to start?
Yeah, I think you know, recognizing what has been achieved and that step forwards that have been made in terms of innovation, being really proud of what can be done, and I think using that mindset and going forwards. I think the resilience thing is really key, as is this value proposition. And I think, you know, people have been banging on about digital transformation for years, but actually now we can see the real value and the benefits of it. Those that had transformed and were working in the cloud have been much more resilient, much quicker to get going and to continue engagement. So I think learn from what you can achieve and keep going.
Brilliant. And then Timia, if you'd like to comment?
Yeah, I think maybe just adding to that, or on that that note, continuing that, I think it's very important to, once you've recognized that you've been successful in certain areas, then basically try to connect that to longer term challenges like climate change, because that will really help understanding what might be those use cases that you would be using to deploy technologies and to improve outcomes for communities.
Amazing, thank you, Timia. And then Clara, if you'd like to come in with any final comments.
Thank you. Although I feel like I've been hogging the mic for quite long. No, for me, it's really, you know, let's take the use cases, let's take the success, let's make sure that they are accessible and explained, and really work on awareness and education, whether it's security, resilience, climate, you know, really showing the benefits and kind of shifting the narrative from the fear to enablement. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists and for everyone for joining the breakout today.